Listen, enhancement is cool, I swear! Now, this enhancement, well, we already covered a previous iteration of the spec. Now, losing Searing Totem and gaining a bunch of new talents, the spec is definitely different. Builds differently, plays differently, but how good is it? Outside class tuning, which is imminent, actually we just have had one, we will go over the base mechanics and how the class plays and feels, so let's hit it! Now before you hit our stream, hey! No really, we playtest and run dungeons and raids at twitch.tv/MarcelianOnline 5 days per week at different times in the hopes that you can catch us in at least one of those days. In our previous video of enhancement, we went over what was unpruned. Since then, Rockbiter has been removed as a filler completely since it didn't make sense from a rotational point of view. I get it, but there's a lot of downtime now, where before you could choose between X and Y to cast, now you cast both and wait for Z for like 2 seconds to come off cooldown. Besides Searing Totem being removed, not much else changed for the basic kit. If you want to check some of the basic stuff like Wind Fury Totem, watch our previous video. After you're done here, please just watch this until the end. As opposed to Elemental, Enhancement still retained Maelstrom Weapon as a resource, and the devs said they are not planning on bringing it back in terms of the resource bar. The tooltip can be a bit misleading in that the passive can stack up to 10 times but only consume 5 stacks at a time. Actually, they just updated this tooltip after we've done the recording. I really hope the issue is just with the tooltip, since being able to have extra Maelstrom weapon charges in the chamber gives you a bit more flexibility when planning how and what to consume your charges on. The passive is a very interesting one and adds to the shaman-y feel of the class, where you can reduce the cast time of anything from Chain Heal to Covenant abilities that are castable. One noteworthy mention here is that Chain Lightning will empower your Crash Lightning if it ends up hitting more than one target. The mechanic is nice, but the buff itself, even stacked to 60%, is hardly anything amazing, considering the base damage of Crash Lightning is dog shit. Again, maybe an issue of scaling. Maybe with Mythic Gear, Titan Forged Enhancement can do more damage than Restoration. Just kidding, just kidding, just kidding. Going to Bastion and making friends with the Kyrians, you will get Vesper Totem as your Covenant class ability. Testing this one, it actually felt the best for enhancement, and personally I feel this ability is the best overall. What it does is put a totem down that will react to your spells. When you use a damaging ability, it lets out an AoE wave of damage, and when you heal, it heals friendly targets nearby. And it does this for 3 damaging and 3 healing abilities. You can also reposition it as you move from point to point or pack to pack, at least for as long as it stays up. Pretty neat, and honestly the most shaman-y Covenant ability so far. Moving towards the Maldraxxus Covenant with the Necrolords, you get Primordial Wave. Now moving away from the Maldraxxus Covenant with the Necrolord... Really? Primordial Wave is the best ability in the world for enhancement. Okay, it was properly designed since last time, but it's still bad compared to what the other 2 specs get. Essentially, you shoot out a shadow damage spell, that applies Flame Shock to the target, and your next lightning bolt will hit all targets with Flame Shock on them. One lightning bolt currently hits for less than a third of a Storm Strike, and lightning bolt is supposed to be the spender of the spec. I mean, my grandma can hit the discotheque harder than how lightning bolt will hit 3, maybe 4 targets. Ha 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 ha! Ardenwold and the Night Fae Covenant come with Fae Transfusion. You essentially channel it for a few seconds in an area, dealing seemingly very high damage to the targets there. After that, you can recast it and it will heal you and those around you for a decent amount, based on how much damage you ended up doing. Maybe it was misleading, maybe it's subjective, but this ended up doing maybe the most amount of of damage, at least in AoE, for me as I tested the spec out of all the Covenants. Or at least it excels at burst AoE damage. Either way, using 2 globals, 1 channeled, to do what Vespertoren can do in the course of 10 globals is pretty good. Lastly, the Venthyr Covenant comes with a buffed Chain Harvest. I did mention the others have high damage, but this one has been scaled up pretty significantly and it benefits from the Maelstrom weapon stacks, which makes it a big cooldown to hit. Critting reduces its cooldown, and honestly it feels like it's meant to be like that. It hits for actually quite a bit per target and it heals for double the amount of chain heal, at least at max level with full epics equipped. It's not bad, definitely a solid pick if Venthyr is your jam, and maybe one of the few abilities that can work for all specs without any downsides. Elemental and Resto can get away with stacking crit, but I feel Enhancement can be unplayable if you don't go haste. We will see in the end. This is where things change the most. On the first row, Lashing Flames replaces Boulder Fist to make Lava Lash increase the damage of Flame Shock on the target by 100% for 12 seconds. This is clearly meant as a single target option since the base cooldown of Lava Lash is more than 12 seconds, even reduced by haste. The talent system seems to retain a similarity with BFA in that you can build your enhancement to focus on Lava Lashes, Storm Strikes, and so on. Moving to the second row, Storm Flurry is also a new talent that gives Storm Strike a 25% chance to strike again for 40% of its damage, and it can chain off of itself. More Storm Strikes fit into the Storm Strike build, clearly on paper or design-wise anyway, and honestly it's kind of meant to go with the talent 2 rows down, which we will check in a second. To replace Storm Mastery, Ice Strike will be the new addition. Ice Strike. It deals decent damage and slows targets. If it hits, it also refreshes the cooldown on Flame Shock and Frost Shock. You might end up using it mostly with the Frost Shocks for the so-called Frost Shock build. To be honest, I would rather have this increase the cooldown recovery rate by 100% for, say, 12 seconds, or reduce the cooldown of your shocks by 50% for 12 seconds than the current effect. Because of the slow-ass GCD and the way the spec will end up playing, you would Frost Shock, consume some Maelstrom stacks, then Ice Strike to shave off 2 seconds off of the next Frost Shock cooldown that would have been available shortly after anyway. And since the GCD window can be anywhere from 1 to 1.5 seconds, you really only delete about 1 second off of your Frost Shock cooldown. The only real good effect of this is with applying multiple Flame Shocks for maybe a bigger Fire Nova, but that sounds counterintuitive, and why wouldn't Ice Strike be designed to work at least just as well with Frost Shock? The fourth row has been changed completely. Elemental Assault will increase the damage of Storm Strike and make it able to generate 1 Maelstrom weapon stack. This is the talent I mentioned earlier that would go with Storm Flurry, provided the design is intended for the Storm Flurry procs to also contribute to Maelstrom weapon. Either of the 3 potential builds Enhancement has is very underwhelming in its performance, so I hope it does work like that. Hailstorm will be the Frost Shock build option. For each stack of Maelstrom weapon consumed, up to 5, your next Frost Shock hits an extra target and deals 35% more damage. This is the fun new build that has the most interaction with your entire kit. The Frost Shocks end up dealing very high damage per individual target, and if Ice Strike could be addressed, this playstyle could round up and potentially kill any downtime. Lastly, Fire Nova is the Flame Shock / Lava Lash build. This is simple. All your targets affected by Flame Shock will erupt in AoE damage that hits nearby targets, up to 6. This reminds me of Bursting Source from Unholy DK, where each target that explodes hits every other target in AoE, this scaling for each target affected by Flame Shock. On paper, the potential is there, however you would normally have up to 3 Flame Shocks out at a time, and maybe 4 if you played Ice Strike to sack Hot Hand. Seeing as how AoE is capped anyway, I am not holding my breath for this build to be as amazing as Unholy. The rest of the talents remained the same as before, bar some tunings here and there, like Ascendance shooting out a wave of nature damage on nearby targets, similar to how Resto has been for the past couple of years and how Elemental also got a change to Ascendance. Most likely minor stuff like this will keep happening over the course of the next few weeks. In this video, we will take a look at enhancement-specific legendaries, but there are 4 shaman-specific ones and a lot more universal legendary powers to play with. Doom Winds makes dropping Wind Fury Totem grant you a 100% increased chance to proc Wind Fury weapon for 8 seconds with an internal 1-minute cooldown. This is an interesting option that actually puts Wind Fury Totem in your rotation, which you might not have been bothered by it since the effect isn't as amazing as it once was. Legacy of the Frost, which will make your Storm Strike reset its cooldown and deal 100% more damage when you consume 5 stacks of Maelstrom weapon. This seems like a similar mechanic to Hailstorm, where consuming 5 stacks empowers an ability. Although I'm not sure how good it would be to combine the two in AoE, since you kinda want to make sure Crash Lightning is applied prior to that, assuming you consume the 5 stacks with Chain Lightning. After that, you would pop Frost Shock, and maybe only after all of that Storm Strike, by which time you might have missed Stormbringer procs. I'm telling you, the spec is thought of pretty fantastically if it weren't for the goddamn GCD, where you get 2 procs in the span of 1 global cooldown window, or no procs or resets at all during 2 GCDs. The inconsistency is killing me! Moving on to a Flame Shock contender, Primal Lava Actuators makes the dot increase the damage of your next Lava Lash by 10% and reduce the cooldown by 0.5 seconds. If you ever do plan to play the fiery build, you would want this legendary, and picking this one makes Ice Strike feel bad, hence why Hot Hand would seem to be the default talent and why Ice Strike isn't really meant to work with Flame Shock spreading over Frost Shock resets. This is one of the cooler legendaries, and maybe because it was an actual tier set bonus at one time. Tier sets, please. But to be fair, any build that doesn't focus on Storm Strike feels a bit off, since no matter how much you buff stuff like Lava Lash and Frost Shock, they never do better than Storm Strike and don't really feel better than Storm Strike in your rotation. And maybe that's where the main problem with the versatility of the spec lies. Maybe it's the Stormbringer passive. Lastly, Witch Doctor's Wolf Bones increases the chance to get Maelstrom weapon stacks, and whenever you do, your Feral Spirit's cooldown is reduced by 2 seconds. This might actually be one of the better ones. Initially, it felt it aligned with Sundering if you take Elemental Spirits as a talent, but you get it way quicker, and if with Raid and High-End Plus gear could drop, it will go all the way down to 30 seconds or less. Currently, with 16% haste, I have Feral Spirits almost every 30 seconds, which is pretty good for a 1.5 minute cooldown. Not sure if that's how it is intended, but might as well be, since the Wolves are overall a pretty shitty cooldown in terms of damage output. Anyway, they did recently admit this in a post, so there is likely a fix on the cooldown on the horizon. If you have been keeping tabs on everything Shadowlands, you probably know or heard that Soulbinds and conduits could potentially be the biggest power gains. But if you missed any of that, let me clue you in. Soulbinds are essentially NPCs you can select from and act as sub-talent trees. Each one is different, and each Soulbind has different paths you can build it with depending on what trait you want. For instance, with the Kyrians, you can take Mechanicos and choose a more tanky approach to get Hammer of Genesis. This trait works well with multiple targets, giving you a stacking haste buff for every new target hit up to 10% extra haste, which is quite a lot with the current stat system in Shadowlands. Or maybe you will go with Maldraxxus for whatever very informed reason I'm not aware of. Gnashing Chompers from Emily will supplement you with the haste you need to keep your downtime as low as possible. Or maybe go with Hymir's Arsenal Marrowed Gemstone for what could possibly be the strongest crit trait available. Although crit may not be your strongest stat, no stat is bad, and the amount you can get really could make a difference, or simply allow you to just focus on haste or any other gear piece out there. The Night Fae have Soulbinds focused a bit more on group support, although Nia has an interesting trait in Nia's tool's Poison. When you interrupt a target, you apply a dot for 30 seconds, and when interrupted again by you, they take additional nature damage as long as that dot is still on them. Since as a shaman you have the lowest cooldown on interrupt in the game, you could be taking the most advantage out of this. While for Venthyr, unless things get nerfed, Nadia is the clear winner here. Not only does she bring Dauntless Duelist to the table to help you with boss damage and single target performance altogether, but Thrill Seeker gives you 20% haste ever so often. 20% haste. 20%. Do I need to say more? Of course, the uptime matters. It's not super often where this could be stupidly broken, but not too rare where it could make no difference. At the end of the day, you are looking to unlock conduits in a specific combination to get the build you want, or maybe make compromises on both Soulbind paths and conduits to get the most out of both worlds. Because the potency conduits, which are focused on DPS increase, are usually not on the same path as your Soulbind's offensive traits. Chilled to the core makes Frost Shock have a 20% chance to grant 2 stacks of Maelstrom weapon. From what I could test, unless I was mega lucky, a buffed up Hellstorm Frost Shock generates Maelstroms always when hitting 5 targets. So it seems the conduit procs on any Frost Shock launched, making it almost necessary for the build. For a more general approach, Focused Lightning seems to be a default choice for everything. At rank 1, it increases the damage and healing of your next spell buffed by Maelstrom weapon by 4% per stack, going up all the way to 10% at rank 15 for a potential buff of 50% extra damage and healing. This works with all builds, it seems. I remain skeptical about Maelstrom weapon and am waiting to see how Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning end up scaling. Magma Fist gives Lava Lash a 25% crit chance against targets with Flame Shock. Although the damage boost is nice, to begin with, you would probably focus on this for the Lava Lash build, hence you would always be hitting the Flame Shock target. Pair it up with the Legendary for a full synergy and still do tank level damage. Why, Blizzard? Lastly, Unruly Winds will give Wind Fury weapon a 40% chance to trigger a third attack. From the tooltip and wording, it seems that the base 25% chance for the effect to even start will also trigger a third attack 40% of the time. If my math is correct, this means that baseline, every 10th main hand attack, you get a third Wind Fury hit in. This scales to an 80% proc chance at rank 15, making every 5th attack proc a Wind Fury hit. There are, of course, endurance conduits that focus on things like healing, surging yourself, and reincarnation to provide stronger benefits, while finesse conduits are more about utility, like reducing the cooldown of Tremor Totem and Capacitor Totem by 1 second. You will unlock 4 conduit slots in different combinations, with at most 3 potency ones, but usually 2. The combinations falls on to you, and honestly, as long as they are balanced and provide proper variety, I am super excited to be able to customize my character to that extent. I absolutely love the fact that I get to cast so many Chain Lightnings and Chain Heals as an enhancement. I still wish they could interact with the spec at least a little bit more. Maybe Chain Lightning could scale with attack power a bit more. It is supposed to be a resource spender, and with the current numbers and how the spec will scale, I wouldn't be surprised if at one point we would stop consuming Maelstrom weapon charges altogether and just DPS with Storm Strike and stuff, so we won't lose out on damage potential. Is that just me? I mentioned it before, but there is some serious downtime with the spec, and it really shows the devs are having a hard time designing it, since even on live with full haste thrusters engaged, the rotation has clunky moments. Not sure if Rockbiter was a good choice to be removed, but we definitely need a filler. Otherwise, you will have moments where you are just auto-attacking WoW Classic style or deciding to hardcast lightning bolts. Huh? You could build with all active skills from the talent tree regardless of synergy, but that just feels silly, to be fair. I have a very strong feeling Enhancement will receive more reworks after we launch this, and as a content creator, I cry softly in my sleep, but as a player, I hope to Amon Thul that they address Enhancement, who is slowly becoming a meme on the beta. If anything, the Earthshrine boys and gals will have you covered for anything and everything Shaman related and updates considered. So check them out! And of course, do not forget about our giveaway, which runs all the way to September the 14th for a chance to get a beta invite to the client. All the details will be in the video, which is on our channel, so check them out. Make sure to follow us on social media so you can keep up to date to every announcement that we make, especially the stream that will announce the winners on the 14th of September. And of course, dear patrons, thank you for supporting our content so much. We appreciate it all the goddamn time. It really makes all of this possible, and it brought us to a point where we're in contact with Blizzard, and that's very, very humbling, and we are super happy for that. And if you're the reviewer, like our content and want to support us a little bit more, the link to the Patreon is down below, and you can find some of our merch. Maybe that's more your jam. But yeah, thank you for watching the video, stay awesome, and we'll see you next time.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.